James Mirtle's on the line of The Athletic. What's up, buddy? How we doing?
Good.
You enjoy that game last night?
I texted you, I think after the second period, and I said, how are you guys possibly going to talk about this one for half an hour? Now we get to do it again, sort of.
The third period presented some things, I guess, but the first two, I really was sitting there with my notes. I take notes every single game, and I actually wrote for the second period, nothing. That's all I wrote. All I wrote from the second period was nothing. Anyway, I don't want to dive into that game right away. First, I want to jump around and do some other newsy stuff. So Saad is doing something that I think is unbelievably admirable, and also a reminder that guys at the end of their careers seem to often want to just win, right? If they haven't won, or even if they have, they kind of will forgo money in order to try and grab a championship. We've seen it with some of the older veteran players that have come to the Toronto Maple Leafs before. But we've never seen this, right? We've never seen a guy who's like, yeah, I'll mutually terminate my contract, give up $5 million that people were like, he might not recoup. I'm like, he might not recoup. I don't know how he's recouping that money. He's not getting $5 million at this point. A guy who has been shopped around for a while and looks a little done, frankly. But what's your early understanding of whether the Leafs would be in on Saad and what it would take for them to get it done, considering they are going to get Yarncroc back and they are going to have a little bit more of a, different, a more difficult salary cap picture in the coming month?
Yeah, that's the big question for me is what's the number, right? Like I don't know. I think he might be able to recoup that $5 million, but just do it over time, right? Like if he can sign a deal now for 2, and then if he has a good playoff, then maybe he's able to sign as a free agent for 2.5 for next year, and maybe he extends his career. Whereas if he goes to the AHL and just rides it out for the rest of this year and next year, then that's going to be the end for him. So I think it's smart on his part. It's a gamble for sure, but it makes sense to me. He's betting on himself. He had 26 goals last year.
Yeah.
Like, I know it's been a tough year this year, but you watch St. Louis, there's just not a lot there. Like, everybody's having a hard time producing offense there. And I don't know. I mean, so to answer your question, I think the Leafs will be interested, but I just wonder if they get outbid. Like, if the number's $2 million plus, I don't think it really makes sense for the Leafs. I think they'd have to do some kind of surgery to fit that in, and it's going to make the rest of what they do before the deadline complicated. But if he wants to play for Berube and play in a contender and the Leafs can find a way to get it done for, I don't know, 1.5, 1.6 or something like that, then I think you find a way to make that happen. So that's my mindset right now, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Well, that right there, though, if he's able to procure a multi-year deal from a team, like if you think that's on the table, I think that eliminates Toronto before the bidding even gets started.
No. What I'm saying is that he signs like a 1-year deal for the rest of this year.
Okay.
Plays well.
Sure. Okay.
With that
sure.
team in the, like if he joined the Leafs right now, I mean, he'd probably be in the top 6, right? Like, and maybe he starts scoring again. He goes to UFA in July, and someone's like, yeah, like I'll give this guy $2.5, $3 million.
Mm-hmm. So here's my working theory with it. This doesn't, like, if you're trying to make room for this team right now, which I think you do, because even though you're saying like he would be in the top 6 today, ultimately Tavares is like right on the precipice of returning, and so is Nyes. And I do want to get into some of the injury stuff that I was talking about with Anthony Petrelli this week, which is their approach in general and the babying that seems to be happening with this organization. But if he came onto this team, you would look at it and say, well, how do you fit him in? And what is the number? And what about Yarncroc coming back? And what about their aspirations at the trade deadline? And is a guy like this going to impact it? And I kind of wonder if he's looking at money that is around $1 million, like 1.5, you start to get into, well, that's a little bit trickier. Why wouldn't you at this point, given what all we know about Nick Robertson, even though he played well last night, be trying to move off of Robertson and then just replace him with Saad?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably what would happen if they are able to get Saad. Yeah, but I mean, Robertson's number is 8.75 or something like that. So I feel like Saad's going to get more than that. But again, it's I haven't talked to the agent. I don't know 100%, but maybe it's not about the money, right? Like maybe he's just looking for the fit, and whether it's $1 million or $1.5 million doesn't matter. Like that could certainly be the case.
So what I would say is it seems like the money doesn't matter when you give up $5 million, right? Like that's pretty significant.
He didn't want to go to the AHL. Like,
yeah,
he didn't, with another year on his deal.
sure.
Like, and I totally understand that. I mean, it's a lot of money for sure, but
that is.
He's betting on himself.
Which is fine. But what I would say to that, and just speaking to you right now and thinking about it more clearly, is yeah, you sacrifice $5 million. You're probably looking not to take the veteran minimum and look just for the complete best fit. You probably are trying to find a bit of a balance of both worlds where you recoup some of that money and you're going somewhere where there's a chance to win and you get a role. And I'm not sure Toronto was going to offer the one part of that.
No, I think that for him to come here, he's probably going to not just go for the bigger number, right? And there's other contenders that have more cap space than the Leafs do, and the good thing with Saad is you don't have to give anything up.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to trade a pick, that should be music to the ears of the Leafs, because they don't have a lot of, as you and I have talked about lots, they don't have a lot of prospects and picks to give up. So, I think they're going to be in on it. I think it makes sense, and they're just going to have to try and see if they can convince him that it shouldn't be about the number, and they'll give him an opportunity with good players.
Yeah, no, I mean, that is probably one of the most compelling cases for him, is he has to look at this and go, boy, there's just really not a ton ahead of me. And with the injuries that have happened here, like last night, he's playing with William Nylander, right? He's on Nylander's line. Hell, he might even get the bump up to the top one if I get my way and have it be where William Nylander actually gets a consistent line mate. So to the injury stuff, though, I talked to Petrelli this week. He pointed something out that I think has been pretty under-discussed, because we've done it with Matthews in terms of, the secrecy around his injury. We've done it with the Leafs saying somebody is day-to-day. But then the interpretation of the day-to-day has been, hey, they're lying to us. Someone's actually really hurt, or far more hurt than they actually have been. And then Max Pacioretty gets dinged up. And this is a guy who, by the way, has incentive to play financially. And he said this, quote, "It's not one of those things where I felt terrible, but it is one of those things where, given the circumstances, it is better to be smart right now and make sure that when I do return, I feel 100%, end quote. And in talking to Anthony and thinking about it more, like a little bit deeper recently, it really does feel as though the Leafs have been terrified of the schedule, whether it's been the condensed games or what they have viewed as extra opportunity to give guys rest when they've had these lulls. And I know that it's been ironclad in terms of the way that they've spoken about injuries, but do you have any understanding about their approach this season in terms of like why they're taking it to these extremes when it comes to not playing guys when they are basically anything under 110%?
Well, I mean, you mean with everybody? Because like I would say with Pacioretty, I mean, he's a guy that they're trying to just get to the playoffs, right? Like, if they were bringing him back early, and he's had multiple injuries already, like the whole point for him is to have him in one piece in April. It doesn't really matter if he misses an extra game or two in January, right? Like, just where he is with his career and everything he's been through, I think it makes sense to sit him more and be really cautious with him.
I would agree, except for it hasn't just been him.
Who else have they said that? Like, I don't think the young guys have been they've been extra overly cautious with.
You don't feel that they've been overly cautious with a bunch of guys, like the way that you're interpreting that multiple guys have been given day-to-day tag and then miss a big period of time and then have kind of come back and just sort of look normal? That hasn't been like at all fishy to you? You think that they've been just like day-to-day and then they've been miscalculating all these things?
No, I think that they're saying day-to-day when they're not really sure, and they're putting a label on it when they probably shouldn't. Like McCabe has the head injury, and that's not one that you can put a timeline on, So who else do they say day to day with? It's Stolarz, and then all of a sudden he needed a procedure,
surgery.
So that's not like babying a guy. And then Camp, I can't remember what Camp's injury was, but they said day to day with him, and then he missed a while. I don't know.
Yesterday, I even got suspicious when I'm seeing like the video footage of Tavares skating around, and I'm like, I know he hasn't been skating for long, but I see Nyes skating around. And they both missed this game. The Leafs score, again, one goal. They're struggling for offense. They fall behind the Panthers in the standings. And I'm like, it does feel to me at least a little bit like that is something that this organization's doing this year, which is, hey, let's take advantage of when we have this extra time. And let's certainly not press guys when we've got tight weeks.
Maybe. maybe. But again, like I think with where they are in the standings, maybe it's probably different, right? If like they're fighting for a wild card spot and things are a little bit more dire, but they probably feel like they've got a little bit more leeway where they don't have to rush guys back in January. And I think for the organization, this season's all about the playoffs, so they're not going to push guys to play through things right now. Which that makes sense, doesn't it?
Kind of, until you remember that guys didn't push through things in the playoffs last year.
Yeah, I mean, from what I could tell, there was no chance that Matthews and Nylander could have played through what they had in the playoffs.
Okay, I mean, they both came back.
Yeah, I know, but they came back when they were able to. I mean, like the Nylander one, but he couldn't even like see straight with what he was going through.
Saw his TV just fine when he had his party.
Well, anyway,
yeah. I'm just saying. I think it's at least noteworthy right now that it's like, hey, this is something, and that this has been an approach for the team, and like that. It's either, hey, they've had a complete terrible run of luck to be one of the teams that's missing players the most to injury. Yes, a lot of that is impacted by Austin Matthews and Stolarz with real ones, but yeah, I do think that it raises secondary questions, which is like, okay, what does it look like in terms of your rest and recovery and your training staff? What does it look like in terms of your approach to this? And what does it mean when you get into a postseason where if you're going to go on a deep run, it's going to require guys to be playing through stuff and them to, have to endure not being 100%, because like that is there's no team that wins the Stanley Cup and they all come out of it and they're like, God, everybody's feeling great.
I mean, I can speak to like the training and medical staff they have is more extensive than anybody else in the league. Like it's just incredible the resources that they have. And when players come in here, even veteran guys that have been around, they all talk about how amazing it is what they've got. So they haven't had a year like this with this many injuries. Like it's really adding up. And I actually, instead of pointing to them babying guys or whatever, I think that one of the reasons for this is they're just an old team. Like they're like the fifth or sixth oldest team in the league. Average age is almost 30 right now. And I think you're going to have more injuries with that being the case. And I think that's a big reason why we're seeing what we're seeing.
So with the injury stuff, do you think that there is any reluctance then on the Leafs' part to have Tanev go to the Four Nations? Have you heard anything like he's one of the credible guys to go? Because
yes.
He is.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. They're thinking about replacing Pietrangelo. They need a right side player, and they want someone defensively responsible. So I think probably the number one candidate is Doughty, depending on how he looks, and he played big minutes for LA in the loss they had last night. So I think they'd like to take Doughty just because he's played internationally and he would be one of the leaders on the team. But if that falls through, I think it's going to either be Mackenzie Weegar from Calgary or Tanev. So yeah, he has a legitimate chance to make it.
I was going to say, when do they have to make that choice? Because it's not like he has a big luxury with time here, Drew Doughty. Like, he just came back, and how many games is he going to be able to get before they have to make this decision?
I think the injury replacements, I believe they can wait until pretty close to the start of it. So I don't know that there's a hard deadline for them on when they need to decide that. So they're gonna give Doughty. I don't know, how many games can he get into here? 5 or 6, and then see what it looks like. I know he wants to play, and I think that's their top choice. But he is 36 years old, and he's missed the entire season. So we'll see.
They've got 5 games. 5 games before there's the tournament break for the Kings. So, yeah, it'll be 6 in total where they get an actual look at him. That just again, depending on how they really truly feel about this tournament and the lean towards a guy who has been excellent for the program and I don't think Drew Doughty is going to be on Team Canada for the Olympics next year, right? Like I think that would be a little bit of a long shot at this point, not an impossibility, but certainly a long shot. I do wonder if they'll look at it and say, hey, this guy's done right by us. And if he looks halfway good, that they'll just lean towards him and say, let's do it.
I think so. Yeah. I think that they're looking at their team and they want to have more. I mean, they got Crosby, obviously, but they want to have some guys with international experience to come in and say, here's how we did it in Vancouver or whatever. And Doughty's played big minutes on big teams. And he's old, but he's still playing really well. Like he had a great year last year for LA.
Yep.
You know, he's still a number one defenseman even at his age, which is incredible.
Listen, you don't need to convince me, all right? Like, I'm a number one fan. I fully believe if he gets named, I'll be defending the decision to the hilt, unless he's at the tournament and then he looks completely stiff and gets body bagged. And then I'm going to be like, how could they make this choice? He didn't have a shot.
Injury.
Well, I'll be like, they put him in a tough position. I won't even really be blaming him. I'll just be blaming Canada for making the choice. Do you have any read on how the Leafs feel about this stuff, though, in general, like the Matthews decision going? They're just completely fine with it, happy with it?
I don't know. I mean, they're not going to tell me if they don't like it.
Yeah.
I don't think they have a choice with Matthews. You know, if he feels well, then you're not going to hold a guy back from that. I mean, I think part of what's playing into it too is there's just been so little best on best. You know, like the last time Matthews was playing on that Team North America, like there just really hasn't been. So I think that's what's going to add more juice to this event for these guys. They want to go play for their country on the biggest stage in that environment. And you know, if there had just been an Olympics 2 or 3 years ago and he had played in that, then maybe the decision's a little bit different. But guys want to be there.
So tell me if this is deeply abnormal. Terry Koshin last night, because I never know with scout stuff, because scouts are there more frequently than I think we realize. But last night, Anaheim, Colorado, Dallas, Edmonton, LA, Montreal, New York, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, Utah, Vegas, and Winnipeg all had scouts in the building. What does that tell you?
I mean, there's usually, I would say, 7, 8, 9 scouts on the list at the games routinely. So I don't know how many you named there. 12. It sounds like a little bit higher than normal, but the pro scouts do turn out in bigger numbers before the deadline. I mean, that just makes sense, right? Like they start to circulate more heavily. So I don't know. I mean, there's some teams on that list that they're definitely not going to be trading with, but yeah, I don't know. I mean,
I was thinking why. Yeah,
nothing,
Pittsburgh. The Pittsburgh guys have to be there for Minnesota.
Yeah, or Pittsburgh has people who are based here, right? Like, I mean, there's a lot of ties to the Toronto market, and that's the other thing too. Is a lot of teams have scouts that live in Ontario, and they end up coming to a lot of the Leafs games.
Why do you think it is that the Leafs always load up the top line under this coaching staff and leave Nylander with whoever's left?
It's a good question. I mean, watching that game, it really felt like this doesn't make sense right now. Like, it's just Minnesota is such a good defensive team, and if they can focus on that one line, and that line's not going, it just feels hopeless, doesn't it? Like, it's just like Nylander's playing all by himself, and unless Holmberg's got more of those passes in his bag that he's been hiding away from us all year, like it's going to be really hard for them to generate offense. So yeah, last night was definitely a game where you get to the midway point, it's like they got to break Marner and Matthews up. I think it's because, you know, Marner is 4th in NHL scoring this year, and he's played with a bunch of different people, and Matthews and Marner want to play together. And when it looks good, it looks really, really good, and it wins them games. You know, when they had that 3-game winning streak that led into this 3-game losing streak, like that's you can see the offense really coming from those guys, and I'm sure that's what they're thinking. But they got to be rethinking it watching that game.
I just don't understand why it's always put the best remaining winger with Marner and Matthews. Like that's the only part of the thought process I really don't get. Like I'm trying to basically just accept the idea that Marner and Matthews are going to play together, that these two guys want to do it.
They should put Domi up there, don't you think? Like, I think they got to try and get Domi going somehow. So I would put him there.
I really watching Domi last night. Like, I feel bad for the thoughts that I have watching him, where I'm like, do you just cut him? Like, are you telling me that you couldn't get a guy off the scrap heap for the league minimum that isn't giving you more than what he's giving you? Like, I just don't.
He looks really lost. I know.
Yeah. I just don't see anything additive.
He's got a no trade clause, and he's got 3 years left on the deal.
Yeah, it's bad. I was talking with McKee. I was like, this might easily be worse than the Nick Ritchie deal. Like, Nick Ritchie was only a 2-year deal. It was for less money. And, yeah, they got off of it. They had to give up picks to get off of it. But Domi's is like, I don't think that he would leave because of the no move, and it's for more and for longer. Like, if it doesn't turn around, this is going to be Tree Living's Ritchie contract.
It looks really bad right now, for sure. He doesn't have a no move. He's got a 10-team no trade. So technically you can trade him. Okay. But who's going to want him?
Yeah.
you're right. I mean, if you put him on waivers, I think he probably goes through right now.
I can't imagine a scenario where that wouldn't be the case. Because again, like we're talking about this stuff where like they just shopped Saad. And how different have those two guys been this year in terms of production? I think, is Domi still sitting on 3 goals?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's on pace for 5 goals and 30 points this year. Five goals is his point pace or his goal pace for the year.
Yeah, I think you're right, though. You need to try him up the lineup. And I don't think that he and Nylander work, frankly. It's too brutal defensively. There just hasn't been. There was that one moment earlier in the year where the two of them like seemed to click on a little bit of chemistry, and you thought, oh, okay, this is going to work. But since then, it hasn't been overly credible. At this point, I don't know what the reasoning is that they wouldn't take a look at him with Matthews and Marner and say, hey, those other two guys are elite defensive players. You often are getting them paired with a good pairing. You're getting a lot of offensive zone starts. Just try to find his confidence at least so that you don't just lose him this way. Because even this guy usually is able to look engaged with some of the physical stuff, and I know he had that a little bit in the Senators game. But ultimately, you see it every time he actually shoots the puck and it doesn't go in the net. Right? It's like he looks so sad that the few times that he's making the opportunity to do it, they're not going in the net.
Yeah. No, I mean, him and Riley, their confidence is just like completely shattered right now. They look like a shell of what they were. I mean, we saw this for long stretches last year with Domi too, right? Like the first half of the season, he never would have got that contract out of the first half of the season. It was really, I mean, I don't know, how many games did he even play with Bertuzzi and Matthews? Like, was it even 20 games?
I don't know. Yeah, I feel like it was around 15 somewhere.
Yeah, but that's what earned him that contract was how good he looked there and how productive he was. And I don't really understand. I don't know who, like, if you wanted to move Marner off that line, I don't know, could you go Domi, Matthews, and then, I don't know, McMahon maybe could play over there? It seemed like it worked for whatever reason with Bertuzzi as kind of like the greedy guy getting the puck, and then you had Domi and Matthews, and for whatever reason that was a functional line for them at the end of last year. But they need some different looks. Like when it's not working as badly as it was yesterday, they got to have something different that they go to. Like I don't know how you just stick with it and watch it look like that for the whole game.
I think when they're healthy, the most creative version of it, if you were going to do the Domi with Matthews thing, which again still feels like a long shot given everything with Matthews and Marner, and it would just feel the thing that sucks about it too is even when they do it, like even if there were to do it, it would feel so performative, right? That it's, hey, we're doing this, but the first loss, the first bad period, we're going right back to Matthews and Marner. But if you really want to be creative, my thought was you go with the top line that is just swap out Marner for Domi and have Nyes on the wing with Matthews. A second line that has Marner playing with Tavares and maybe Pacioretty, and then keep McMahon with Nylander because the two of them have played really well together. And you're essentially saying, yes, it's Holmberg in this spot right now, but ultimately that's the position that you're trying to address. So whatever center you bring in, he anchors between those two guys. And then it kind of feels like, all right, you've got the three guys spread out over 3 lines trying to carry it and trying to drive everybody else. Like no disrespect to Tavares in the season he's had. But, then you've still got Marner with a center who can put the puck in the net.
Well, and they've looked good together when they played together. When Matthews was out, that was when Tavares looked at his best.
Yep.
And, I mean, Tavares normally plays really well with Marner. Like, that's going way back to when they first got him. And so, I like that. At the very least, I think what they need to do is have that look ready to go if it's a night like last night where they've just got nothing. And you can flip it back and forth. And, they just – I don't know. And like I said, earlier, Marner's 4th in the NHL in scoring, and that's with the power play being as bad as it is. So I don't know how hard you can be on his game, but there's just some nights and some stretches here where it's just not working. And they've got 5 of their last 8 games, they've got 1 goal or less, which is it's just not going to get it done.
Well, it's just wild how much it's felt like feast or famine lately, right? It's like 3-game losing streak, no goals, 3-game winning streak, ton of goals. 3-game losing streak, no goals. You're like, it's the Babadook meme. Like, why can't you just be normal? That's the thing with the Leafs right now. Can you just be somewhat consistent with this thing? Because it's all over the place.
I love that. Why can't you just be normal? I think that could be the tagline for their season. Like their season's been hard to get a read on because they were good defensively the first 20 games of the year, and the last 20 games they've been bad defensively, and it's just like what are you? What? I don't know.
Well, I don't know if I was texting this to you last night, but it's been a sleepy product for a little while now, and I kind of crushed the idea of. I hate when it's, hey, these guys need a break talk. I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry. I get it. Human nature, blah, blah, blah. You just came off of playing Saturday and then getting a game on Wednesday. You had some time. You had some downtime here. You've had downtimes throughout the season. Yes, there have been moments of the schedule being condensed, but there have also been big stretches of no play. And maybe that break is in guys' heads, but it still feels a little far away to be doing that as like an excuse of they're thinking about the beach or they're thinking about the travel plans. Like it's still 2 weeks, right? I just mentioned, I think they've still got 5 games before then. So I don't really love that as an idea, but it's been, a little lackluster. There's been a lot of these games where it felt like feet haven't been moving and there hasn't been real energy from the team. And then that's led to this crowd talk stuff, which I do want to just get into with this thought. Like it's a small, it's not like, hey, what is it, the chicken or the egg? Like I do that all the time. But again, people, and you talk to brassy type people, they're making fine money, right? Like business is booming. So part of it has to be, who cares? We don't need people in their seats to start the second period. We don't mind if they're spending money in the clubs and sinking more and more dollars into this product. But do you think that it's starting to get to the point where they are feeling this a little bit, the public pressure, the fact that Spittin' Chicklets is talking about it, former players keep talking about it, that it's basically just been called the library by every single person. And again, I'm not trying to put fault on people when the product is that way, but I'm saying, do you feel as though the higher-ups, they're actually looking at this and saying, you know what, we actually might have a bit of a problem here, or that this is just a non-story to them?
I've never gotten the sense that they're super worried about it, but this has been a problem for a long time.
Yeah, but it hasn't felt like it's been getting hammered the way that it has been until recently. Like there's always been little spots and like I've always argued with Versteeg about it because he loves to bring it up and I've seen others mention it before. But right now, like you've got guys on your own team talking about it. Like Matthews has addressed it. Marner has addressed it. That feels very different than past iterations to me.
Well, part of it is the lack of playoff success. When I talk to fans, they're just frustrated with this team and they're tired of this team and they don't want to pay a lot of money to watch them play the way they did last night. And I don't blame them. Mm-hmm. I don't blame. But again, the building's been bad for a long, long time. Like it's a bottom 5 building to watch a game in the NHL, which is hard to believe in Toronto. And I think I've had some suggestions. Like I think that they should have a section in the lower bowl that's like a fan zone or whatever. Mm-hmm. And maybe you go to the season ticket holders and say, do you want to sit in a crazy section that's going to be loud and people are going to be, and it's behind one of the nets. And if you don't want that, we'll put you somewhere else. But we want to get the people together who actually want to make noise. And at least they could have like some sort of energy in the building because, I went to a game and sat in the stands and over the Christmas break and it was bad. Mm-hmm. And the vibe was the fans were grumpy and yelling and it wasn't good. Like it wasn't a fun atmosphere. So I don't know, but I do think that the higher ups need to think a little bit differently about this and do something about it. Like it feels like, I don't know if that's because there's a divide between Brendan Shanahan and like the corporate side of the operation, or mm-hmm. I don't know if there's just so much money there that they can't change it, but I think they need to do something with the way the building is set up. And, there's other teams around. I think Nashville's got a fan zone, like do something, mm-hmm. inject some energy into the building somehow.
I just think like one, you should want to have a really fun atmosphere that people want to be a part of in general. Like I've made this point before, but it was like for a really long time. And I've only been to one Raptors game this year, but it was, I would always tell people, go to a Raptors game. Like, go to a Raptors game on a Friday night. That is such a fun ticket. You go, and there was, like, a real atmosphere to it. And even if the team wasn't great, you were still going to have a lot of fun because the way the crowd was. And with the Leafs, it doesn't feel that way to me, where I would suggest to someone that wasn't just like a diehard who's in town for a night, like, hey, you know what you should do is go sink hundreds of dollars into potentially seeing them score a goal and being in the library and kind of cold, and then spending a bunch of money on really expensive beer. It's just not an easy sell. So to your point of like, to that point, I think you as a business should be trying to think like, hey, don't we want it that this is a suggestion to people, that there's a desire for this beyond just the Instagram post of, hey, I'm at a Leafs game, the status that comes with being like, hey, I'm at a Leafs game. Don't you want that element of it? But two is, to me, I think that there's always been a bit of, I don't even think, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. There has been an excuse culture with this team for quite some time. And seeing these guys start to mention the fans and how it's quiet, and Matthews after the Reeves one, and Marner during practice, I'm going, I don't want that to fester long-term either. I think that every player would tell you that when a crowd is going, it gives you extra juice. And for a team that sometimes struggles to find it and then plays in an atmosphere that doesn't have it, that there's something from just like you want it for a competitive advantage element as well.
Yeah, no, I think this is a good question for Keith Pelley coming in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like in, the next press conference he gives, like that should be something that's asked. And I don't know. I feel like I've written about this for a long time, 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
and it just doesn't seem like there's ever been any suggestions from ownership or the business side that they're going to do anything about this. Like they're doing renovations in the arena now, and it's, more fancy restaurants and nicer concourses and more areas of the rink to go to that aren't, the playing surface, and
more reasons to be out of the seat. The opposite of what they're doing with the Clippers, where they're like, we want no reasons to be out of the seat.
It's like finding, like you said, finding ways to squeeze every dollar that they can out of you when you go into the building as a fan. And I don't know. I think it needs a rethink. And just the game operations, like,
game ops have been a long-standing annoyance for fans.
Watching the game on TV, it's like, they need a pump-up song. They're playing this song that they've played every single other game in this situation.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost like AI is doing putting what song on and what's on the video board. It's the same every night. And then when I was traveling around regularly and going to other rinks, like you go to a game in Vegas and it's like, wow.
Yeah.
It's like a random regular season game. Remember I think it was a Sunday night game, 5:00, and Leafs Golden Knights. That's one of the best atmospheres I've been in. It was a regular season game. It was like February. It was amazing. And that's Vegas, but part of it was what they did with the game ops, and the intermission was really popped, and it was fun to be there. It was a good atmosphere. Even if you're not a hockey fan, you would like it. And that's just not the case here.
Yeah. You know what? That's a good point, though, too, of just like, why doesn't it feel more like an event here? Why not have more blowout things when you're at a Leafs games and be like, whoa, I'm at a Leafs game, like these things are happening.
Tired.
Yeah, that's it. And I really like what you touched on with the familiarity stuff, though. And this goes back to a long-standing topic with what happens when you continue to run back a core that people are frustrated with, that it is ultimately an entertaining product. And for fans that have seen this type of a game, right? Like the game that they just had last night is a vintage blueprint Leafs game. Slow start, lackadaisical play, try to turn it on late and come back, and one of the stars scores a goal and gives the people something to cheer about, but then they end up coming up a little short against a team that doesn't have nearly the talent that they do, even with the injuries that they have to Tavares and Nice. And if you're a fan of that, you're like, God, how many times can you watch the same movie, right? How many times can you watch it, even if it's your favorite movie? And I do think that's part of this.
Yeah, I think that the number one mood, or however you want to call it, in the fan base right now is frustration.
Yeah.
And they're not going to believe in this team until they do something in April, and that carries over to the regular season. And I'm sure ratings are down, and we can see it with us. The engagement is not as high as it's been in the past, and the fan base is just, they're frustrated and they're bored and they're tired of this, and they feel like it's going to just be like Groundhog Day again when it comes to the playoffs, and I can't blame them for that.
Mm-hmm. Even the beats of the season, they just feel so similar right now, even with the depth guys, where it's like you mentioned last year, Domi struggled and then he found it. It's like Riley was a whipping boy for much of the regular season, then he was good in the playoffs, so he gets his annual reprieve.
Matter?
What?
Like, if you're a fan, does it really matter? Do you really need to follow the beats of the season anymore? Like, they're going to
But you
make
can
the
just
playoffs.
jump in and, like, that's what I'm saying, is it's like a movie that you've seen a million times. If you're away from it, but then you sit down, you're like, oh yeah, I still know what's going on in this scene. I can still repeat this verbatim. And that's sort of where it's at. Like, you can just kind of like jump in on the year and go, oh, that's the storyline thing that's happening right now. And that's all heading to a deadline that you and I have talked about like a lot. And it doesn't have anything overly sexy attached to it. There still remain no real names of consequence that I think are in the actual realm of possibility for this team. Like I've tried to kick around some just fun thought experiment trades, but even those, you look at it and say, well, what is Toronto going to offer? And you're like, oh yeah, they can't really get in on that, or I don't really see a world where they can get in on that. And then all the talk is just like, hey, they're trying to re-sign Marner, and they're going to get to the end of the season, and they're going to offer him a huge bag of money. We're going to be debating whether or not he got too much again. It's like, God, give people a bit of a break from this, like, for the love of God. Anyways, James Mirtle of The Athletic, thanks as always for making time, buddy. I appreciate it.
Thanks, JD.
Cheers, bud.